session is being recorded, and you will be sent a link. And number three, even though it's only happened once, I still have to say it, is that if we get disconnected, please log back in, because I will come back on. I have backup Wi-Fi here. And if for some reason it falls through, I will come back online. So it may get disconnected for a while, but the same link will work and we will be back. All right. So let's get started. I will share a screen with you guys. All right. So we are talking about men's mental health today. So it's November, and it's usually, awareness for men's mental health. They've also made it about men's mental health. It used to only be about men's cancer, but it now has become about more than that. And we are now talking about men's mental health. I would like to say that I am a clinical psychologist and a managing director of the LightHouse Arabia, and majority of my work for the last 6 to 7 years has been with men. I've worked with usually top performers, these men that usually look like they have it all together, and most of them do, but they just feel so lonely because there's nowhere where they can actually go and talk about some of the things that they are struggling with, because it is human to struggle. And so even if someone looks like they're not struggling, does not mean that they're actually not struggling with something. So usually all top performers have coaches or counselors, and I have served as a counselor to many men who are in that space where it sort of gets lonely up at the top. And so I have encountered that. I also have men in my life, and I've studied the psychology of men quite a bit. And so I will bring from all of those experiences, as well as the research, which, by the way, is not that much, but we will talk about that. So before I get started, I know that this talk will bring up certain things for people. So I just want to mention to you guys who are not aware of the Lighthouse, who we are, just so you know that there's a resource here available to you guys. So the LightHouse Arabia is a mental health and wellness center in Suqeim, Dubai. And we have psychology, psychiatry, which is medication management, as well as services for children and adolescents. So we work with couples, adults, families, and we've been around for almost 1 decade. We're one of the largest centers in the region. And one of the things that is most special about us is our mental health first aid, which I think everyone should be trained in mental health first aid. If you have a question, you can ask me about that later. And that we have psychologist-led support groups, 18 of them, for people who just want to feel like they want to talk about things, and maybe they don't have the commitment necessarily for ongoing therapy, or they don't have the money or the time, but they can come to these twice a month groups where they can talk, or they can learn from other people who might be struggling and what they're doing to cope. So I just want to mention that out there, is that support groups and mental health first aid is going to be important. And our support groups range from everything from like single parents to divorced individuals, to cancer, to infertility, to grief, to the Beirut explosion, name it. Usually we have a support group for it. So I just want to mention that to you guys. So I want to talk a little bit about the prevalence of mental health issues and then the unique challenges men face. I really want to spend a bit of time on that, and then I'll go into depression, anxiety very, very quickly, because we've done a talk very similar to this for World Mental Health Day. So many of you guys might be aware of the back end of this talk, but I really want to just name some of the things that men are struggling with. The psyche of men, especially men who don't know other men, women who don't know men. Like, what are we talking about? Why are we naming these things, right? So the back end of this talk, I'm going to zip through. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the psychology of men and the unique challenges men face. So let's just talk very broadly about mental health. So what are your reactions when you think about the words mental health? A lot of times people will say, oh gosh, it's only for crazy people, or that doesn't happen to anyone I know. We're all very good. We're all very happy. We're all very grateful. We're all very religious. We're all very dropping in ethnicity. It doesn't happen to people like me. And I think this is where most people will actually admit that mental health is actually or mental illness is actually the top ranked stigmatized illness, above and beyond every other illness. If you have mental illness, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to say anything about it. It is very difficult. 1 in 2 people are actually frightened of people with mental illness. So if you say, oh, you have anxiety, it's almost like, oh, what? Or if you say, I actually attempted suicide, or it almost feels like, oh gosh, what's going to happen to me now that I'm around you? Or even talking about some of these things actually feel very scary for people. 4 in 5 people actually admit that it's harder to have, it's harder to admit having a mental illness than any other illness. And this is something that has been studied with men, especially, that they will take time off to go, get their heart checked, or their headache, or they have a backache, or, maybe they feel dehydrated. That they will take time off and feel like it is worth their effort to go address even the smallest to the biggest thing when it comes to their physical health. If they felt anxious, if they felt low, if they felt depressed, they would buck up and actually show up to work. And this was a wide spread study done in the UK that actually showed that men will not consider that something that they need to address or actually, do something about. And then, oh, why is this not coming up? Sorry guys. Having technical issues here. And psycho, nuts, mentally ill, crazy. These are the most common descriptions. If people were to say, well, what do you think about mental illness? This is what's going to show up. Whether you ask the teenager or the eldest person around, these are the words that show up for people. And so while there is so much education happening around mental illness, mental health, I think when people think about mentally ill, they usually think like institution and straitjackets. They actually don't think about just you and me and people that you might be working with. And just the fact is that 1 out of 4 people, so look around your life, look around your work, 25% of the people in your life are going to be struggling with a mental health disorder / mental illness. Okay, so this is where you could be having low mood, anxiety, other substance abuse issues. These types of things are very, very prevalent. It does not discriminate, doesn't matter how smart you are, how old you are, what gender you are, what race you are, what religion you are. It actually will show up for everybody. During this talk, we're going to have, so many people actually take their lives because every 40 seconds, someone is actually committing suicide, completing suicide. And it is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Disability meaning that they can't go to work, they can't function in their life. And it is a major contributor to overall global burden of disease. The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations all have prioritized mental health, mental illness as a priority, as something they need to be paying attention to, because it affects family, it affects social fabric, it affects your bottom line also. So I just want to say that amongst and then lastly, amongst all illnesses, the diabetes and the hypertension and the cancer and depression is the second leading illness worldwide. So it can't be that it's only happening to women, right? It can't be that it's only happening to famous people. It's happening to the men in our life. And it is a very, very lonely world for men, especially to talk about some of these things. So let's talk about mental health. Mental illnesses, when you look at the World Health Organization or any of these types of things, you actually see that women are a lot more, the prevalence of depression and anxiety in women is a lot higher. So good, men don't struggle with these. Let's have all sorts of initiatives for women, because they have so much struggle and they're going through so much and they're locked up in patriarchy and gender roles and. So we should pay attention to women. And so there's been a lot of light that has shed on women and their mental health issues, as well as the movements for women to fight through patriarchy and fight through their roles. And so what most people have found is that if they peel away the layers and they read between the lines and they don't have these numbers necessarily reported, is that mental illnesses are most likely underdiagnosed in men, okay? Because if you look at the facts, men might not come out and say, I am depressed. They might actually not know that they're depressed. They're just like, oh, I'm having a bad day, or, oh, I just feel nervous, or, oh, I feel stressed, or my God, I'm so angry, right? They might be saying these things, but guess what? These are symptoms of a mental health disorder, at least, if not all the way to a mental illness. But if you look at these facts, men die on average 8 years before women do. They're 4 times more likely to abuse a substance. They're 4 times more likely to end their life by suicide. They're 11 times more likely to spend time in jail. Men report lower life satisfaction. They are reported to be rough sleepers, almost 87%. Versus, the other, which are women. So when men just don't sleep as well. Men actually have lower access to social support of friends or families or relatives. And depression and anxiety is much higher in women, while substance use disorders and antisocial behaviors are much higher in men. So if you look at women, or if you look at young girls, girls will report depression, anxiety, eating disorders a lot more, where young, like boys and adolescent boys will actually be reported like antisocial and like ADHD, conduct disorder, acting out, bullying. So while boys are not reporting depression or anxiety, they're acting out their depression and anxiety because of the messages that they have gotten that it is just not okay to cry. So where women are okay, girls are okay to say, well, I feel really sad, or I feel really nervous, or I feel very scared, boys may not actually do that, and they might actually be acting out. So if we just look at the prevalence rates of mental illnesses or mental health disorders in young girls and young boys, you will see that girls will act inwardly, so the depression, anxiety, eating disorders, where boys will be acting out in behaviors that are observable. But they're still showing that this is a mental health concern. This is an issue. They are not okay inside. Something is not right. When we have people bullying is not just about, a power differential. There's very deep insecurities and violence turned outwards rather than violence turned inwards, which is what you could refer to as substance abuse or eating disorders, is violence turned inward. So if we look at some of the unique challenges men face, actually, sorry, wrong slide. So men are less likely to seek help. This is a fact that while they are struggling, we know they're struggling because it is the leading cause of death for men in the UK, 45 and above. The leading cause of death. Above all other disorders, suicide is the leading cause of death. Like, that's scary. Now, that's, while I'm not saying that everyone that commit suicide is depressed, there's a lot of different diagnoses involved in suicide, but there is mental health disorder there, definitely, where they feel so hopeless, where they feel so powerless, where they feel so alone that they'd rather actually take their own life rather than to face some of those issues. So this is a silent epidemic where suicide is, and that's why there's a lot of different organizations that have come up as a result of this leading cause, 7th leading cause above hypertension, above diabetes, above heart disease is suicide for men. That's really scary. And that is something that is, definitely prevalent in around the world for sure. Obviously, I'm talking about UK here, definitely very much in the US, but now let's take the culture where machismo is very much present, patriarchy is still very prevalent, and they have these rules where they get these messages about toxic masculinity. You have to be strong. This sounds like something you would hear in the mall here, right? Be tough, come on, be a big boy, be stoic, man up. Aggressive behaviors are accepted Feelings are for girls. Don't be a sissy. Vulnerability is a weakness, and you'd rather just show a strong front. Asking for help is weakness. Hey, can you come over and help me with this? Or can I tell you something that I'm struggling with? Could you imagine the men in your life saying that I'm really emotionally not feeling okay? But they would say that I feel very stressed right now. What are you stressed about? Oh, this work is, really getting on my nerves. Like, they will talk like this, but underneath that is anxiety. Underneath that is a burden that they bear alone, because emotions are a sign of weakness. Lots of men have been, there's lots of articles that you guys can read online, but these are things that I've heard from my own ears, but definitely have found online as well, that I've just learned to live with it. I don't want to burden anyone. I'm too embarrassed to come see a psychologist. There's so much stigma around men's, me coming and talking to a psychologist about things, or me asking for medication for my emotions. Like, really, I don't want to admit that I need support. I have no one to talk to. I don't know how to talk about it. I actually don't know how to talk about it. It's like, okay, well, asking a man, like, how do you feel? And it's like, I don't have the language for that. No one taught me that when I was younger. When I felt something, I was told that, come on, be a man, tough up, you're a big boy. And like, there was no vocabulary given to me to even talk about some of these things. So how can I even go and seek help when I actually don't have the language to seek help? So it becomes like a problem-solving session, and we problem solve rather than actually talk about feelings, right? I don't know. Mostly I hear you just need a drink. This is also something we hear a lot, like, come on, man, let's just go get a drink. And this is men saying that to other men. So men are just as equally responsible for silencing men as women are, as well as the broader culture. Women want a tough guy, and I've actually heard this. Like, I cannot go to my wife, I cannot go to my partner, I cannot go and talk about some of these things, because then she's going to start freaking out, and then I'm going to have to contain her and myself. So I'd rather just not talk about it. Women don't actually have the space to see a man actually feeling vulnerable, and that rocks their world, because women seek security, women want a tough guy, women want a man who has it all together, women want a man who's a protector, a provider. Is there any room for a man to feel what he feels? Not really. And then, generally speaking, men don't get depressed. We get angry. That's usually how it is. And that actually is a fact, that depression will show up differently in men than it shows up in women. Men, it will show up as anger. It will show up as agitation. It will show up as you smoking a whole lot more of those cigarettes, or you wanting shisha a bit more, or you drinking a little bit more. That's how it shows up in men, where in women it might show up as low mood or tearfulness or sadness and these types of things. It actually shows up differently in men. And so what are some of the unique challenges that men are facing? I want you to imagine that all the people, especially women on the call, I want you to imagine all the friends you have in your life, and all the people you go and you talk to, and you got in a fight with somebody, or you had a bad day, and you go and you vent and you process and you talk about things, and they comfort you and they hug you and they love you. I want you to imagine all the people in your life that you do that with, and remove them. They don't no longer exist. Everyone you contact no longer exists. Anyone who supports you no longer exists. Now, also imagine, women, that there's a sense that we get. There's a sense we have about things. We feel certain things. Now imagine call it your intuition, call it your gut feeling, call it all of these things, your psyche, your inner wisdom, your guidance. Sever that off, because that also is removed. So we're removing your friends, we're removing your inner guidance, your intuition, your instinct. And now imagine that your worth, your self-worth, is defined by strangers, and it's linked to how productive you are. This is the life of a typical man. And yes, we're women, and I speak as a woman, but I speak on behalf of all the men that I work with and that are in my life, and I also have 2 sons, that yes, while we are also defined by and governed by these restrictive roles, expectations, mainly patriarchy, men are also defined by those roles. They don't have any space to move around within those roles. Protect, provide, procreate, produce. These 4 P's are the P's that the men live by. And there is no room for negotiation on that. Men that are, that are the primary caregiver, they're looked at by society like, what's wrong with that guy? Why is the woman working and he's not working? Why is she having, what's wrong with that dynamic? Like, they're judged very harshly. And I know that because that's what has been told to me by some of the clients, that if I were to stay home because my wife has a successful career and I want to manage the kids, it would just be torn apart by the culture. So I just want to say that it's not just women that are suffering, and we will never win if this becomes a man or a woman issue. So women will never feel safe. Women will never come into their full power if the issue becomes man versus woman. The issue has to become man and woman versus patriarchy, versus these old school traditional rules and systems that suffocate both men and women. So this is where I think a lot of people are going wrong, and men are really feeling, especially with the Me Too movement. And yes, I'm all for it, but I think there's a lot of men that just feel like, well, I'm not the one who did this. Why are you attacking me? And so there's a lot of silencing that's happening, a lot of shaming that's happening, a lot of blaming that's happening, and that ain't helping the situation. So men are actually silenced by the collective culture, and men are silenced by women in their life. Like I said, if a man comes and says, I feel sad, or a man lays in his bed for 3 days because he's depressed, like the woman is like freaking out, and all of a sudden he has to show up, he has to produce, he has to provide, he has to protect. Who's protecting him? Who is providing for him? Who is nurturing him? Like, that's not happening, right? Because you got it. And so that's one thing, but men are actually silencing other men as well. There's a high competition and power, complex among men. Who is the alpha male and who is going to be the strongest of us all? And, in the playground, when you are young boys, think back to all the boys and all the men on this call. I would like you to think back as to when you were first told, hey, you know what? It's not okay to cry. And then everybody's laughing at you, but it wasn't necessarily other girls laughing at you. It was other boys laughing at you if you cried. It was other boys who silenced you. It was your father who might have silenced you. Man up, be tough, be a man. Like, these types of messages are coming from men to men also. So this is not, again, women silencing men, but also men silencing other men. Come on, man, let's get a drink. Oh, be positive. You know what? You have a lot to be grateful for. These are all messages that men hear from other men. And there's a high competition culture, a fear of not measuring up. Power is the central issue. There's a winner, there's a loser. I got to be one of the winners. That means you got to be one of the losers. This is what's happening around men. And there is so much shame. There is so much shame around that, because if you are defined by these 4 P's of productivity and, protection and etc., and you are meant to be strong, then showing any sign of weakness, what would that do to a man? That would be locked in under shame. And above shame is a whole lot of rage. And they are alienated from themselves, from the people in their life, from their children, from their joy, because they are so, they're just taught that this is how you are supposed to be. And they turn it into rage. They will drink a lot more. They will do a lot more drugs. They will work until they drop. they will get to a place where they feel no pain. And by the way, everything that I just named are numbing agents, including work. Sex is a numbing agent, drugs are a numbing agent, smoking, drinking, all of these are numbing agents. Substances are numbing agents. Work is a numbing agent. So when you call it a aholic, it's basically trauma that you are basically saying, I don't want to feel this, so let me just go do something else. So these are some things that men are struggling with, and it's all there in the facts. I already named them to you, that the facts speak for themselves, that they are, it's a leading cause, top 10 leading cause of death for men. They are drinking a lot more, they're abusing a lot more drugs, there's a lot more trauma there, but they're just not speaking about it. And so this is where the real issues are. Yeah, men's mental health and depression and anxiety, but guess what? Depression and anxiety, no man is going to come up and say, I'm depressed or I'm anxious easily. Some men will, and it takes a whole lot of courage to do that. And it will be very easy for them maybe to say, oh, when I was a teenager, I struggled with this. But to say that I'm struggling with this now is going to be a whole lot harder. So there are different stages of vulnerability as well. For me to tell you guys that, man, I'm really struggling these days is very different than I struggled, at the beginning of COVID. It's very different because, oh, okay, well, that was in the past. You bring your best front to me now. So this is what we are actually seeing in men. And so there's a quote that I really like, which is, for men, there needs to be an emotional movement, a releasing of pain. And the poison men have been holding in their collective stomachs for centuries. It is not power-oriented in any way, but powerful, and it frees men and their spirits from their tyranny of the old paradigm of don't feel, die younger than women, don't talk, don't grieve, don't get angry, don't rock the boat, don't trust other men, don't passion before bill paying, follow the crowd, not your bliss. And these are basically the messages that they're internalizing because of everything else that I just mentioned to you guys, is that these are the messages that men live with in their collective stomachs. And these are the ones that are basically eating them from the inside out. And this is why, a main reason why they're so disconnected from their body that they can't even, a lot of women have heart disease too. Women have heart attacks too, but they're a lot more attuned to their body and their inner guidance. So they go and they get help a whole lot earlier than men do. That's a fact. And that's why men die earlier than women, not because, they just have shorter lifespans and their bodies are different in any way, but it's actually because they take on a lot of stress and they're disconnected to their bodies. They don't pick up on the symptoms. Come on, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. And then it's something. And then they die 8 years earlier than women do, where women might pick up on something and say, I wonder what that is. And they'll go get help and they'll get early treatment and intervention before men do. And that goes for mental health issues too. Women will just pick up on some of these things. There's room for us to talk about this stuff, but there's no room for men to talk about this stuff. So what does it mean to have a mental health problem or mental illness? Well, we think mental health looks like this, right? Eeyore and people, oh my God, like this is what it needs to, what it looks like to be depressed or anxious or to have, an addiction. This is what it looks like. Well, actually, we know that it actually looks like this, where the strongest people, you're like, what? I would never have expected. Michael Phelps, he's he's one of the most amount of Olympic gold medals, like him, really? Or The Rock, really? The Rock? Elon Musk, really? He's always so happy. We also know, Robin Williams or Anthony Bourdain, these are just the people we know in our lives that we're like, I would never have guessed. And or mental illness looks like. I wouldn't say, well, oh yeah, I called that one. It was coming. It usually doesn't happen that way. Usually they will dig deep and they will bring their whole self, their best self all the time, every single day. They'll put on their male face, their male bravado, and then inside something else is happening. Inside something really, really tough is going on that they don't even know how to name. And so I just want to say that it can have where there's a whole iceberg underneath. You can have anxiety and appear confident. You can be suicidal, have suicidal ideation, and turn up to work just fine. You could have a panic attack in the bathroom right before you show up on your presentation. You could be battling with depression and tell the most amount of jokes, the most jovial person at a party. You could be a team and still feel worthless inside. You could be highly successful and still feel like you're an imposter, that really you bring no worth to the team. Now, I know people are like, well, how am I supposed to know that? Like, how am I supposed to support? It is in our little sort of microaggressions towards people that make that we actually set the culture for people to feel safe to speak about things these days. Like, man, that was psycho. We say these types of things, and there's a man in the room, and there's a message that he's getting that don't want to talk about that, or, so are the types of things that we do in order to create a culture of safety, right? We are being very super politically correct when it comes to racial things, or when it comes to maybe gender relations, but are we being safe and correct in the way we speak about emotions or mental health? Probably not. I mean, I see you all day long, every day on social media, like, ooh, here's me losing it, or here's me completely off balance. Like, we say these things, and that doesn't make me feel very safe, actually, to come out and say, well, I think I'm probably lost it. And so it's very, very hard for people to open up when the culture is so toxically positive and just show up all positive all the time. So I want you to think about mental health on a continuum, and you think about your own mental health on a continuum. There's good mental health, and then there's poor mental health, and just beyond poor mental health is going to be mental illness. So mental illness is not on this chart. So you can actually have poor mental health, just like you're not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of your health, and you could not have clinical depression necessarily. But you stay in that poor mental health arena for too long, you're going to get poor mental or you're going to have mental illness. So this is a mental health continuum, and mental illness lays on the back end of poor mental health. You could be having really good practices, you're exercising, you're eating right, you surround yourself with people that are supportive, which is the biggest predictor of happiness, by the way, is not how much you make in your bank account, but how much support you have in your family, how supportive you feel, connected you feel. You could have all of these things, and this would mean that you have good mental health. Most of us are probably hovering somewhere around the middle, especially during COVID, that we're like, oh, okay, I'm just chugging along and I'm struggling. But most of us are actually, within that space. Now, 25 of us are actually off the chart, like I said, into the mental illness range, where most of us are sliding back and forth, given what day of the week it is and what's going on in our life. But it does take effort, it does take commitment, and it does take intention to have good mental health in today's world. The world that we live in is not conducive to good mental health, right? It's just bombarding us, and we're inundated, and we're online all the time. We're not sleeping properly. We're overwhelmed. That is not very conducive to good mental health. So the world that we live in is not supporting our mental health. Like, think back to maybe a different time when we didn't have work with us all the time, or when we didn't have something fed to us all the time. We had to read the newspaper, we had to turn on the TV, we had to open the magazine. Like, it was an inundation of things, right? So we are not living in a very mentally healthy, conducive environment. So we got to fight for our mental health in this arena. But what is a mental health problem? What is mental illness? Okay. Now we're hovering in the poor mental health to mental illness range. Now, this is major changes in your thoughts and behaviors. It's persistent over time. It impairs your functioning, and it interrupts your life. Defining mental health is actually where you're realizing your potential, you're coping with life, you can work productively, and you can contribute to society. Mental health is something we all have. It's important to overall health. So this is not like, oh, she has a mental health problem and I don't. No. We all are struggling with mental health problems. Mental illness is something that is very specific. Okay, so I just want us to broaden our horizons here, that you have mental health, I have mental health, I have poor mental health, sometimes you have poor mental health. If I don't tackle that poor mental health, it can become mental illness. Just if we look at the biopsychosocial model of that. And biologically, some of us are more prone to mental illness because we have a family history of it. And so enough stress, and I can turn on that gene. And just because you have a mental illness in your family does not mean you will have a mental illness if you have good mental health practices. So we have to look at it as physical health. Just because I have diabetes in my family doesn't mean I'm going to have diabetes in my life. Okay, if I'm eating right, if I'm exercising, if I'm watching my glucose, etc., etc., if I have good stress management techniques, I'm not going to get diabetes, because my stress diathesis model says that we all carry these genes through epigenetics. We know that, and it is our lifestyle that is the biggest indicator of some of these disorders, including Alzheimer's, including diabetes, including heart disease. It is our lifestyle that actually triggers on these genes, not our genetic code. I can carry all sorts of codes, but my lifestyle in the end will determine that. Mental health is not only for crazy people. It is not the same. Mental health is not the same thing as mental illness. It is not about feeling good all the time. Remember, we're sliding back and forth on that spectrum. Every Wednesday, I remember when COVID started, I had a meltdown, and I was probably hovering in the poor mental health arena at that point. And then I built up myself again. And so it really is something we all have to work towards. And mental health is not a fixed state. Slip and slide back and forth. I'm very cognizant of the time, and I really want to make sure that I leave room for some questions. So I'm just going to quickly run over this, but guys, we've done this talk before. It is on our YouTube channel, so you guys can watch if you want to learn more about that. I also would like to say that if you're like, interesting, I would advise you to get trained in mental health first aid, because it actually takes you through all of the things that I'm about to talk to you about, but in a much deeper and much more elaborate way. I'm just whizzing through this stuff right now. So sadness versus depression. We can all be sad. Sad is a good thing. Sad means something matters to you. Sad means that you're attached to something. Sadness means that you are alive. Okay, so it lasts usually a few days. You can have some minor, like, low bum, and usually it's brought on by something, maybe it's the weather, or maybe it's you had a tough phone call with your colleague, or maybe, you and your partner got in a fight. You can feel low, very normal. You still are able to like go out with your friends and have a good time, or you can still watch your Netflix show and still enjoy it. But you usually are not thinking about taking your own life at that point, or, not feeling really, really withdrawn. Clinical depression is actually a serious clinical condition. You are struggling with these symptoms such as low mood, changes in your appetite, changes in your sleep. And one of the most important hallmarks of clinical depression is you don't enjoy the things you used to enjoy, in addition to all these other things, okay? So that is where you just don't take pleasure in the things you used to enjoy. Now, I'm not saying you need to be medicated at that time. I'm not saying it's even dangerous at that time. I'm just saying you need to pay attention. If this is going on for 2 weeks, you're like, wonder what that is. Because depression could also be, and I believe it actually could be a call for you to reevaluate the things that you're doing in your life. The things that gave me joy when I was in my 30s are not the same things that are going to give me joy in my 40s. And so there could be a period where you go through a depression because you're just not the same person, and maybe you need to reevaluate your values at that time. So I'm not saying that, oh my God, red flag, we need to do something and we need to medicate you, or you need to. I'm just saying, pay attention, guys. If this has been going on for 2 weeks, just like you wouldn't let a rash go for more than 2 weeks, you would actually go, like if the rash was spreading and it was affecting your life and you couldn't work and you couldn't engage with your kids in the same way, you couldn't engage with your partner in the same way, then I would say, I'm going to go get that rash checked. That's it. That's basically it. And we need to take the drama and the trauma out of just getting and having a conversation with a psychologist about this stuff. Like, hey, listen, I've been feeling these things. What do you think this is about? Et cetera, et cetera. Just like we would go for a dental check and we would go for any other check, we need to talk about these things. Now, clinical depression, if it's not addressed, can often lead to suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. Like, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like miserable. I don't like anything. So that can actually lead to that. But again, I don't want you to couple those two and freak out. Like it is one of the symptoms, but it is not a symptom of depression. And there's usually a sense of like hopelessness that can accompany this. Clinical anxiety, these are all the different things that show up in clinical anxiety. Physical pain, psychological, you're irritable, you're indecisive. So there's a fight or flight response usually. Think about fight or flight response, and now think about it actually interrupting your life in some way. Clinical anxiety is a real thing, and it can really make you nauseous. It can, make your mind rush. You can start to rush, and you can actually start to numb yourself. You're starting to smoke a little bit more. You're starting to avoid that person. You're avoiding that situation. These types of things are now hovering within the clinical range. And so you're looking for excessive nervousness. Now, was I nervous before coming and talking about this? Yeah, I was a little bit nervous, but like it didn't stop me from showing up here, right? And so normal nervousness is okay. Excessive nervousness, where it's actually getting in the way of me doing anything. It's normal to be nervous when you go out during COVID. But if I'm like under my bed or not leaving my house or just, hyper paranoid about it, okay, now we're moving in the clinical range because there are precautions you can take, and then the rest of it is anxiety. So it can really be felt in the physical body, and it can be, in the mild sense, it can be very vague, but in the clinical sense, you'll know, like, this is disruptive to my life. So think about the clinical anxiety is severe and long lasting. It's a serious clinical condition. It can lead to suicidal thoughts or feelings. It can actually be a lot of shame and guilt, especially in men, because they're like, come on, man, what's wrong with me? Buck up, toughen up. And individuals with anxiety can actually be very, very high functioning. They can be very detail oriented. They can be outgoing, and they can talk a lot, and they can be You see them like that, and they're actually quite anxious on the inside because they're seeking your approval, and they don't know how to slow down, and they're afraid that you might disapprove of them or you might leave them. So you might actually see them like that. They might actually be very loyal. They don't know how to draw those boundaries because they're seeking that approval. So it actually is a little bit harder to spot anxiety. These people are really, really immaculate and high performers. I've worked with super high performers that are actually driven by anxiety. How do you know the difference? The difference is that I can be a high performer, but it's coming out of a place of love. Or I can be a high performer and it's coming out of a place of fear. Oh my God, what if I mess up? What if? That is coming from clinical anxiety and these are both top performers in their companies. So this is something that is really, really masked to the point where it's actually rewarded by corporates and companies, because this person ain't gonna let you down. This person gonna show up, they're gonna be on their best, they're gonna have all the little T's crossed and I's dotted, because that's who they are. Underneath that is a whole lot, and it's unsustainable actually. So, all right, I'm gonna go through this. So remember I told you about the spectrum here? That's what the spectrum actually looks like. So you are healthy all the way from coping to struggling to now we're not doing well, okay? So look at this screen here, and most of us might actually be somewhere between coping and struggling right about now. We're tired, we're exhausted, we might just, be getting sick a lot more. We might be engaged in numbing behaviors. Yes, guys, Netflix is a numbing behavior. Sorry. Life, it's just not, we're not connected to our family as much. We're not engaging with our partners as much. So we're struggling or coping. We're just not feeling it. right? And then there's some of us that are like thriving during COVID, and they're just usually really good and they've got this. And so we might be moving back and forth within this range. And there's some days we're on, and then there are just some days we're struggling. I want you to look at it this way. But then if you stay in the struggling zone for too long, you start to deplete yourself of the serotonin, and there's other things that lodge up in your brain, and it can actually lead to depressive symptoms. You can't stay in the struggling zone for too long. And this is what you need to be doing. Basically, if you're struggling, just talk to someone and just say, I'm naming it. Nothing serious right now, but I'm naming it. At the LightHouse Arabia, we do emotional well-being checks. Just like you go for a dental check and they check and they do a cleaning every 6 months, we're supposed to do that so we don't get cavities or root canals. We have the same thing as a mental health or emotional health check. It's an emotional well-being check. You fill out forms. We say, yay, listen, keep an eye on your sleep, keep an eye on, your marriage, keep an eye on this, but most you're okay. We might recommend therapy, but we might just say, here are the resources, watch these YouTube videos and get some sleep, or make sure you start exercising. That's kind of what we would do in an emotional well-being check. 30-minute, absolutely benign. There's actually no drama associated with that. So I would actually say, if you're struggling, get an emotional well-being check and name the issues, because it will become unwell if you stay too long in that space. I'm not going to talk about that. And actually, guys, if you guys can just take pictures of these 2 slides, some things to say to men or women who are struggling. It could be worse. Come on, just be positive. Don't be so negative. Just don't give up, man. Don't give up. It's like, okay, thanks. Be strong. Your family needs you to be strong, right? What would they do without you? It'll all be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Well, I don't know why you feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. Like, look at all the wonderful things that are happening in your life. Man, at least you have a job. There's so many people that don't have a job. At least you have food on the table. At least you're married. I don't know. We say these things. It's like, at least what? Like, when you say stuff like this, you basically shut down that door. If someone comes and says, man, I'm really not doing well, like, whew, emotionally, I'm not, mentally, I don't feel like myself. And you hear one of these things, you basically say, door closed, no more conversation. There's no one that is going to open up beyond that, right? And so what we want to say is, yeah, I'm sure you feel like you're struggling. Tell me more about that. I'm here. I'm listening. I can't imagine what it's been like for you. Tell me. I'd like to help you with this part. Let me take this off your plate. Okay, is that good with you? Like, I'll take this, and they're not going to ask for help, so you're just going to be like, listen, man, I'm going to take this off your plate and you go do that. And then we can talk about the way forward, but helping them in some way, because they might not find it easy to ask for help. I remember when I first, I have I gotta be tough, sort of a masculine energy. We all have masculine and feminine in us, by the way. So I have this very sort of masculine energy present. I remember one of my friends, when I was going through a very difficult period in my life, she would just send me orange juice up to my apartment, and she would send me food, and she would do this. I would not eat, but then she would send it to me and I would eat it. And eventually I realized that, oh, okay, well, this is what it feels like to get help when you're struggling. And then that made it okay for me to actually hustle. So helping people, just to give them a taste of what it feels like to help them, might actually be something. So don't say, hey, man, is there anything I can do to help? No, don't ask them, because they're not going to say, no, I got this. That's what they're going to say. What you're going to say is, what are you working on right now? And then you're going to say, let me take that off your plate. And they'll say, no, I got it. Just say, listen, I want to do it. So you're going to have to struggle a little bit. They're not going to make it easy for you. And what have you been doing to take care of yourself? What can you do to support you this month? What can I do to support you, etc. So these are some of the Instagram channels. If you guys have to log off and I don't answer your question, please direct message me, because I would love to answer that question for you. And LightHouse Arabia for parents, we have these 2 channels, and for teens and youths, we have this channel. And so I would just like you to mention that. And now I'm going to answer some questions. I am going to be looking at the side of my screen and being quiet as I read the question. So please don't think I'm like zoned out, but I am actually here. So yes, the talk was recorded. So someone says, it says we have lower life satisfaction. What do you think the reasons are? I think I gave you the reasons. If you cannot live your truth, if you cannot live honestly, if you cannot live with integrity to your own inner world, if you don't have access to the things that give you joy, right? Because you're supposed to provide, protect, procreate, etc., you're not going to have higher life satisfaction. Men don't have a lot of room to move around. They feel almost trapped in their role because they have to, you know, like where a woman might say, well, this career is really not suiting me and I'm going to go try something else. It's a lot harder for a man to go do that because, well, who's going to pay the bills, right? And so just like that quote said, that do you follow your bliss or do you pay the bills? And I'm not saying you have to make a choice between the two. There has to be a way where we can do both, but it is a whole lot harder for men to follow their bliss than because they have to pay the bills, and not just for their immediate family, but maybe they're taking care of their, you know, extended family as well. So when you can't live authentically, you are not going to have higher life satisfaction. So mental health has so many diagnoses where you can be one or two, or many of these. So my question is, how are you sure that your diagnosis is right for a person? You should not diagnose anyone if you're not a clinician, and you should not diagnose yourself. Do not diagnose yourself. The whole point of this talk was basically for me to say, hey guys, if this is going on, pay attention. This is not, hey guys, if this is going on, you are depressed. No, you have to go through a clinical consultation for that. So it's very, very important for you to go get a clinical consultation if you saw some red flags or even orange flags waving during this talk. Yes, you can have depression and a substance abuse disorder. You can have ADHD, anxiety, and substance abuse disorder. So there can be multiple disorders that show up at once. So this is where you want to get a consultation by a professional before you start doing some of these things to yourself and labeling yourself, etc. A male actually asked, what is the solution for I have no one to talk to about it? I think this is where it takes a little bit of courage. You know, my husband, he works with a therapist and he's very open in his company about the fact that he works with a therapist. He doesn't have clinical issues as of yet, but if he ever does, I think it will take a lot of, and he's in a leadership position, and probably because he's married to me, it's like, you better talk about mental health. Only because I think it's important that people in leadership positions talk about mental health, because then you make room for people to talk about mental health. I speak very openly on my Instagram channel about my journey with therapy and my journey with all sorts of mental health interventions. And again, not because I am depressed or anxious in this moment, but I have had depression in my life. I have struggled with difficult periods in my life where I was really suffering. And I think it's important for people to talk. So there's one role that I have as a leader in this space to talk about these things. There's one role that companies have to make space to talk about some of these things, and more people that are trained in mental health first aid, the more they're likely to make that space, because we're destigmatizing mental health. And then for the men, I think it's important to talk to people that are safe. Do not talk to people that you feel you're going to get shut down by. And that might mean that you have to reach out to a professional first. It might mean that you say, all right, I need to sort of first get some fluency around speaking about these issues because I don't even know how to talk about this stuff. And so you might actually have to speak to a professional. They might actually help you unpack some of that stuff. And then you might go talk to a friend. And then you might actually say to that friend and say, hey, listen, man, I watched this lady on a webinar and she says, I need to take risks. I need to open up. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And I need to open up, and I'm going to open up to you. I don't want you to problem solve. I don't want you to tell me the solutions. I don't want you to give me advice. I'm just going to tell you how I feel, and I want you to sit with it. You might have to coach people around that. I had to do that with my husband. Like, don't problem solve. Don't tell me what to do. I know what to do. I know what's good. I know what's bad. I just need to talk. And I need you to be my witness. I need you to be my companion. And as I'm struggling, just sit there and be with me, and then I'll be okay. That's all I need from you. And if I need something from you, then I have to ask you. Men, you can't be like, well, if you loved me, you would have known. No. We don't get to do that because you guys really put on a brave face. And so how can I know you're struggling? So you actually are going to have to take some, have some courage and say, tell me what you want from me. Tell me what you don't want from me. Tell me what you're feeling, and learn how to do that. Maybe we can have like a workshop on how to talk about your feelings. But I have done an Instagram live on this, by the way. So you guys can go through my stuff to deal with that. Let's see. So how do you deal with fears of not measuring up? Just like you deal with any other fear, you have to get underneath the fear, and you have to go back to where the fear started. Where did it start? What did it start? Okay. Who started it? What did you internalize? What messages that you need to sort of bring out into the light? And that's the thing about shame, guys. And men carry the most amount of shame. And that is that, I mean, that's why men would rather kill themselves than to admit that they need help. And that's a fact because of the suicide rates. But I think it's important to bring things into light, because when you talk about them, shame no longer exists. And that's why we're so big on support groups. We like support groups because you realize, oh man, I'm not the only one that had a job loss, or I'm not the only one that suffers with infertility, or I'm not the only one that's struggling while I'm diagnosed with cancer, or I'm not the only one that has emotional concerns. So this is where it's important, where I'm not the only one that's struggling with my divorce, or I'm not the only one that's struggling being a single parent. When you start to feel like you're not the only one, shame goes away. So some of these are really specific, guys, and I'm going to get a printout for some of these questions, like imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome, I think most men are struggling with imposter syndrome because they don't want to be found out. They don't want to be found out that they're weak. They don't want to be found out weak when I mean that they feel weak. They don't want to be found out that they feel sad. They don't want to be found out that they feel nervous. They don't want to be found out that they feel that they're not in their power. Like, that's where the imposter syndrome comes in. Imposter syndrome on many levels for men, even just in the way they show up in the world, but also where they show up in their work. That can be imposter syndrome, where, oh God, everyone's going to find out that I actually have no idea what I'm talking about. Or, like, the more I know, the less I think I know. Like, it just really messes with your head, where you really, like, you've read and read and read and read and read and like, trust that, but no. But there's so much more I could know. So that can be a result of anxiety, because you're like, but just like me, I've been studying Jungian psychology, and I've been studying it for 3 years now, and going to the Jung Institute in Zurich. Like, I would be like, oh, do I really know? But I don't know, but maybe I should read some more. But you just never feel like you know enough. That would be an imposter syndrome. And that can lead to a lot of anxiety. So someone said, how can I speak to and help someone with a mental health problem? I think I answered that question. And if you really are in a people leadership position, please, guys, get mental health first aid. We do it once a month at the Lighthouse, where you learn how to be a mental health first aider. So you basically become a first responder. It is a 10-hour course. That means there's a lot you need to know before you start going and supporting people, because you might end up saying the wrong thing. I'd rather you say nothing than to say the wrong thing, because that really shuts people down. If you just sit there and say, tell me more, I'm with you, I hear you, great. So if you don't know what to say, just say these few things: that I'm with you, I hear you, I'm going to be with you through this. You're not alone. I see you, right? This is what holds people. And so instead of saying, oh, come on, like, this is just a bad time, it'll get better, like, this is not going to help them. So mental health first aid actually teaches you how to be a first responder. And if you go on our website, you will actually find the calendar for our monthly mental health first aids. We also have mental health first aid for parents for their children, because we don't know. Teenagers look like they're having some sort of mental health crises like every other day of the week, but that's just the part of being a teenager. But what is real and what is a proper diagnosis versus what is that just teenagehood, that's the difference. So I would really, guys, 25%, 1 out of 4 people in your life. If I told you 1 out of 4 people is going to choke on food in your life, would you go and learn physical first aid? Yeah, you would. If I told you 1 out of 4 people is going to need CPR in your life, go and get physical first aid, you would. I'm telling you, 1 out of 4 people is going to struggle with depression, anxiety, substance abuse, suicidality, etc. Get trained in mental health first aid. All right, so I'm going all the way down. So some people, yes, recording is available. I think I said that 3 times. Are you guys not listening to me? The cost of mental health first aid, I think, is $1,500. Don't quote me on that, but it's less than 1,600 dirhams for a 10-hour course. And you get a book along with that. That is like a manual, and you can go through it. And so we've really kept it low cost, and it's led by psychologists. And so you can ask them all sorts of questions, and it really is a very rich experience. We literally are, it's a non-profit part of our the Lighthouse, because basically we're paying the psychologist to show up and make sure that you actually have your materials. So that's the cost of that. But you can find more details. So, that's a great question. Mental health is not accessible when it comes to insurance. Yeah, guys, it's because we're living in like the Stone Age when it comes to, the way we think about health. The way we think about health is we've disconnected mental health from physical health. All the research shows that the mind and body are connected, that the sleep can actually impact your physical and mental. I mean, there's so much research that's coming out, but that's not translated over into corporate policies about coverage on mental health. And it actually is shooting themselves in the foot, in the sense that if you do not provide mental health coverage, there's a 5 to 1. $1 has a $5 return on investment, according to the World Health Organization. If companies make a $1 investment in their employees' mental health, there's a $5 return, because they're not going to be calling out of sick. They're not going to have poor work. They're not going to have turnover. They're going to have more positive culture in their environment. And so we're just not thinking holistically and broadly and 21st century when it comes to our mental health. We actually are thinking Stone Age, physical health. Oh, there's something wrong with your liver. We go after the liver. We medicate the liver. We don't actually realize that the brain is connected to the liver through the vagus nerve. And if your brain ain't right, your liver ain't going to be right either. Your gut is related to your brain. And if you have gut microbes that actually are unbalanced, you can have anxiety and depression. And so the brain can actually throw off your gut. It can throw off your immunity. It can throw off. And that's why our fight or flight response, and we go on vacation, all of a sudden we get sick, right? Because the brain and body are constantly talking to each other. They're constantly talking to each other. And so, yes, if someone from the company head is listening to this, we need to start covering mental health as part of corporate insurance policies to make it more accessible. That is just one of the things we need to do in this part of the world to make it more accessible. I could go on and on. So someone says, what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? So the psychologist is only talk therapy. We are trained in therapies using our words and our behaviors to treat mental health and mental health disorders and mental illness. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor and they will treat you with medication. Okay, so medication is what we advise you to take if you are very symptomatic, like you really are like now struggling to function in your life. You can't show up to work. You are just laying in bed. You are, not able to perform at work. You're not able to, you're very angry or you're very aggressive and you just feeling like you can't even access the will to get better. We would say get on medication and then do treatment with talk therapy. Sorry, there's something in my throat. You can't even cough these days without everybody freaking out. Guys, I'm still on Zoom. So you want to do it simultaneously. If you're very symptomatic, you start with the psychiatrist. If you're feeling like, I'm off, I would go to the psychologist, learn coping skills, learn what's underneath your symptoms so you can treat it at the root, and then consider medication if that's not working. So if you don't know, then I would just say do a mental health, emotional well-being check, because those are always a great place to start to just, it's a low cost, low time, because it's 30 minutes, it's online, and you can actually get some information about whether or not this is a serious issue or not. So emotional well-being checks would be something. So can mental illness be reversed? Is it too late? Yeah, of course. Everybody leads a normal life. You can have a very normal life, guys. And if you have had clinical depression, depending on what type of clinical depression it was, because if it was brought on by, let's just say there was a death in the family, or there was a divorce in the family, or whether you lost a job, or whether it was COVID, or those types of depressions, usually, you can come out of that space, right? But if it's been long lasting and you've had it since you were a child, then it's probably reoccurring. You want to get underneath that. You want to get underneath why did it happen back then and what triggered that. And when you heal some of that stuff, then obviously you're in a lot more control. But absolutely, it is treatable. Absolutely, you can live a very normal, happy, fulfilling, engaged life, even if you have had a diagnosis of some mental illness or depression or anxiety, especially depression, anxiety, or addictions. I feel like if you have these, like you're usually able to get underneath that, heal what needs to be healed, and then live a very fulfilling and engaged life, especially these three. Even if you've, had suicide attempt. Martin Luther King had 2 suicide attempts when he was an adolescent, and he struggled with mental health difficulties his whole life. Like, he was very purposeful, he was very engaged, he was very, very driven. And so you can be in and out of these spaces, but it's just that if you've had the diagnoses, then you know that you have a tendency to do that. And so you want to build, like, if you know that you're going to be swimming in deep waters, you want to learn how to swim. Some of us are going to be not swimming in deeper waters. So, okay, maybe it's not so urgent for you to learn how to swim. But if you know that you've been depressed before, if you know that you struggle with anxiety, learn how to swim. And that's where coping skills and having a toolbox actually is going to be very important. Toolbox of coping skills. All right, I think I can answer maybe a couple more questions. Do you think that it will work if people talk about their issues to themselves? No. um, I know where you're coming from because I've been there. Like, I know how hard it is to open up, but I'm a big encourager of talking to yourself, by the way. I'm a big encourager of journaling, spending time with yourself, listening to yourself, being with yourself, wanting to be. But we human beings need a witness from the earliest, inception to like when we were born. We needed an emotionally attuned interaction in order for us to feel safe, in order for us to feel seen, in order for us to not feel lonely, in order for us to not feel afraid. And so just having another person who is a good listener, I mean, it doesn't have to be a therapist. Maybe you're lucky and you have a friend who's a good listener, who's highly attuned to you, and that can be enough. All the research that has been done on happiness has said that the number one indicator of happiness is social support. And they've done all sorts of research studies on, these blue areas where people used to have very long lives and, longevity, like centennials, like living above 100. And they looked at their food and they looked at their diet and were they smoking, were they exercising? They couldn't find it, but they found that they had community. They would just hang out with each other all the time. They would meet every evening, have conversations, have like meals with their neighbors. And as that fabric of that community started to fall apart, their diseases started to go up. So we cannot underestimate the value of social support. It is the number one mitigator of stress. Is, do I feel like someone's got my back? One person. Do I feel like they know? Do I feel like someone sees me? Someone knows me? And I think that's the role I play for a lot of the men that I work with, is that someone knows everything about me. I can't go to this person or that person or that person, but this one, she's got it. She can hold all my stuff and I don't have to carry it alone. And that's what I mean by an advisor or counselor, that you shouldn't have to hold it all alone. And I would really ask you, what are you afraid of? Why wouldn't you talk to someone about it? Yes. Yes, the LightHouse Arabia does online therapy. I do not see one-on-one clients at the moment, but the LightHouse Arabia does have that. Yes. Someone says, is there any age range related to this topic? No. It's from adolescent boys all the way to men. And these messages that I talked about, like be tough, be a man, don't be a sissy, don't be a whatever, they start very early for boys, where the girl falls down and you say, oh honey, what's wrong? Oh, let me come, let mommy fix it. And when the boy falls, you say, oh, come on, be a big boy. That's the message they get when they're 2. And the messages begin very early. And the battle begins very early. The front becomes very, very early. The movies they watch, the macho dolls they have, and all these messages. I don't think Ken changed in any way. I'm not sure if he did, but Barbie changed in many ways. But like the idea that, there can be all different types of dolls for boys that represent the male, I don't know, not really. Yeah, on the Obama slide here, hold on. I put this quote up. Somebody asked me about this quote. He basically said what I said. I just wanted to get to questions, and it's, you've got to get help, guys. Yes. So someone said, I just blow up for no reason. Like I get really angry. Yeah, nobody just blows up for no reason. So I would look into that. You're holding on to something, and imagine that feelings are like a drawer or a closet. If you keep shoving things into the closet, at some point it's going to start spilling out, right? And so that's blow up happening. You keep putting things in, you keep putting things in. It might last through your 20s, even get you through some of your 30s. Right around the end of your 30s, it's like, I got no more room. That's where the breakdown happens. And that's where the midlife crisis might come up. I just need to do something for myself. And then you get a divorce, you have an affair, you buy a new car. That's not it, guys. That's not going to fix it. Just saying, it ain't going to fix it. It's the inside. Happiness is an inside job. I think I've answered a lot of these questions. Can anxiety and depression hit at the same time? Yes. You can be so anxious that you can get depressed, usually. And that's just a lot more overwhelming, that it just causes you to feel hopeless. And eventually you deplete yourself of serotonin, which is the happy chemical. And so that can actually lead to depression. So someone said, are there any support groups that you can recommend? There are lots of support groups that I can recommend at the LightHouse Arabia. There is not one for men. However, if I get a lot of people asking me about it, I would love to have one for men, actually. I wouldn't be the one leading it. It would only be men. So I'd find a male therapist to do it. But I definitely think that men need support. But we do have one for emotional health that is led by a man, Dr. Robert Chandler. If you go on the LightHouse Arabia Instagram account, you will see a talk that he recently did, or a little snippet of what he recently did about men's mental health. So can I do a journaling workshop? Maybe. I have lots of workshops I wish to do, but I haven't done it. But yes, I do have journaling prompts, by the way, on my Instagram account. So these are just ways you can start to engage with your psyche, engage with your inner voice. All right. I think. So, yes, I think I answered all. So no, we don't have Arabic speaking courses or therapists at the LightHouse, but there are some in Dubai that you can access. Okay, I think yes. So I will say it like for the 5th time. You will get a link to this PowerPoint, guys. I've said it. I've said it. Somebody keeps asking me the same question. So I'm saying it last time. All right. And so I would like to end on the note that yes, women have our own set of issues. There's a whole set of issues. And somebody actually said, can you do one on women's issues just like this? So maybe I will not talk about depression and anxiety in that talk. Maybe I'll just do one on giving you a window into the woman's psyche. And then this would be the window into the man's psyche, and what we all are struggling with, just so we can have a little bit more understanding. Because I know that when, you know, my husband travels a lot for work and he's like literally grounded since COVID. And he was like, what is this? You know, I have 4 children and I'm managing a business and my parents and my in-laws. And so he actually had no idea some of the stuff that I juggle, because I make it look easy. And that's what a lot of women do. We just make it look easy. And, or we might just complain every now and then, but it's like, I still got this, but they cannot possibly imagine the weight of some of the things on our shoulders. So right down from like, did they get their vaccinations, to are the school supplies in order, and the parent-teacher conversations that need to happen, and the et cetera, et cetera. So naming some of this stuff actually allows the men to actually say, well, oh, okay, well, this is what's going on in the woman in my life's world. So along with all sorts of media stuff that we struggle with. We have our own set of shame, perfectionism. We have to look perfect. We have to talk perfect. We have to be perfect. Like we have this idea where men have the 4 Ps. We have our own set of Ps, including perfectionism. So perhaps I can do a talk for you guys on women's issues, and we can take it from there. So thank you guys for being here. And there's still a lot of you guys still here. So we went on for about 1 hour and 25 minutes. Listen, send me a direct message. If you have any questions, I would be very, very, very happy to respond. And thank you for being here. And I'll say it one more time. You will get the link to this talk. All right. Take care, guys. Have a good day. Bye.